Her name was Grace Whitman, a 68-year-old woman whose life had been tied to the soft soil of Willowbrook Orchards, a small apple farm nestled among the rolling hills of Pennsylvania. For almost 50 years, she had been a wife, a mother, and the steady heart of a place built with her bare hands. Her fingers, now stiff from arthritis, still remembered every motion, kneading dough for sourdough bread at dawn, pruning apple trees beside her husband, Henry, under the morning mist. 3 weeks ago she buried him. The man who had been her partner in everything, from planting seeds to building dreams, was gone. Henry and Grace had been married since 1981, a union built on shared labor and quiet love. Together they had built not just a home but a legacy, the orchard, the farmhouse, and the family they raised within it. But the morning after his funeral, Grace realized something she had never allowed herself to think before. Maybe she had built everything with love, but love alone hadn't kept her family close. Her children, Daniel and Sophie, had drifted away long before the cancer took Henry. And now, as the silence filled the farmhouse, Grace began to feel that loss more than ever. Daniel was the eldest, a sharp, driven man with a career in Boston's financial world. His suits were pressed, his words measured, and his visits home had become as rare as snowfall in July. Sophie, on the other hand, had always been the dreamer, chasing new wellness ventures that bloomed fast and died faster. Henry had quietly funded her every attempt, telling Grace that, one day she'll get it right. But now, as Grace sat alone at the worn kitchen table the night after the funeral, she wondered if her children would ever come home for anything other than what Henry left behind. The next morning, sunlight poured softly through the lace curtains she and Henry had chosen 30 years ago. Grace brewed the simple coffee Henry loved, not the imported one Daniel preferred, and waited. When Daniel and Sophie came downstairs, they looked like they were heading to a meeting. Daniel in a crisp blazer, Sophie in silk with perfect hair. "Mom," Daniel began, placing his coffee cup with careful precision. "We've been talking." Sophie exchanged a glance with him before adding softly, "We think it's time to start settling things, the estate, the house, the business." Grace blinked slowly, unsure she'd heard right. "Settling things," she repeated. "It's practical," Daniel said, leaning back in his chair. "You can't manage the orchard and the house alone. It's too much for someone your age." Her age. The words stung sharper than she expected. Sophie reached across the table, her tone honeyed. "There's a lovely retirement place just 2 hours south. Sunnyvale Home. They take great care of people your age." Grace rose quietly, gathering the plates, her hands trembling slightly. "Your father and I built this place," she said softly. "It's not just a house." But Daniel had already opened a folder. "Dad wanted this," he said, sliding the papers toward her. Grace looked down at the papers Daniel slid across the table. The logo on top wasn't from their family lawyer but from Daniel's firm in Boston. Henry's signature sat neatly at the bottom, steady and firm, too steady for a man who could barely hold a pen in his final months. Grace's eyes lifted slowly. "This isn't from Mr. Jenkins," she said, naming their longtime attorney. "Dad was clear when he signed it," Daniel replied quickly. "He wanted me and Melissa to take over. It's better for everyone." Sophie nodded, her voice rehearsed. "A developer's offering $7 million for the land. You'll be comfortable for life, Mom." Grace's hands tightened around the edge of the table. "You're talking about selling your father's life's work," she said softly. Daniel sighed, exasperated. "Mom, you have to be reasonable. The orchard's old and the market's changing. It won't last forever." Grace met his gaze, her tone calm but firm. "I've kept this orchard alive through storms, droughts, and debt. Don't tell me what will last." Sophie reached for her hand, trying to sound sweet. "We just want what's best for you." Grace rose from her chair, steady despite the ache in her joints. "What's best for me," she said quietly, "is honesty." Daniel frowned, his patience thinning. "We're trying to help you," he said. "You can't handle this place alone." Grace smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But it's still my home." She gathered the dishes, setting them gently in the sink. We'll talk tomorrow, she added, not looking back. Daniel opened his mouth to argue but stopped when he saw the look on her face. Calm but unyielding. She left the kitchen without another word. Her heart heavy but her mind awake. That night she didn't sleep. The farmhouse groaned in the wind, and the sound of the apple trees swaying outside reminded her of the life she'd built, and what she stood to lose. When dawn came, Grace moved quietly through the house. The smell of coffee drifted up again, bitter and foreign. Daniel's imported blend. When she came downstairs, her children were already waiting, dressed and ready, her small suitcase by the door. "We packed some things for you," Sophie said cheerfully. "We thought we'd drive you to Sunnyvale today. Just to look." Grace poured herself a cup, ignoring the suitcase. "I'm not going to a retirement home," she said plainly. Daniel checked his watch, his tone cool. "Mom, the paperwork's done. We close the deal next week." Grace looked at both of them. "I've lived here my whole life," she said. "You can't sell what's not yours." "Dad left it to us," Daniel snapped. "It's time you let go." Grace looked at him long and hard. No anger, just disbelief. "I need my medication," she said calmly. "And I'd like to take a few family photos." Sophie's smile returned, relieved. "Of course, take what you want. We'll wait." Grace climbed the stairs slowly, her knees aching. But she wasn't gathering medicine. Behind a loose panel in the bathroom cabinet, one Henry had built years ago, she reached for a small, fireproof box. Inside was something her children didn't know existed. The original deed to 20 acres of land, bought in her maiden name long before she became Mrs. Whitman. Her fingers trembled as she held it. Henry once called it their just-in-case land. And now it was exactly that, her power, her proof, her freedom. Grace tucked the deed carefully into her purse, along with her passport and medication. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from a new, steady resolve. She glanced around the bedroom one last time. The faded curtains, the old dresser, the framed photo of her and Henry from their first harvest. "You built this with me," she whispered, touching the frame. "And I'm not letting them take it." Then she walked downstairs, her face calm. "Ready?" Daniel asked, impatiently tapping his watch. "Yes," Grace said softly. "I'm ready." They mistook her quietness for surrender. But she was far from defeated. The car rolled past the orchard, the morning light glinting off rows of trees just beginning to bloom. Grace looked out the window, every apple blossom a memory. "You remember when you and Dad planted this row?" she asked softly. Daniel didn't answer. Sophie glanced at her phone instead. "We're almost there," she said. "You'll love the community, Mom. Everyone's your age. They have a pool, art classes, book clubs." Grace's lips curved faintly. "Do they have orchards?" Sophie blinked, confused. "What?" "Never mind," Grace said, returning her gaze to the land that had once been her life. After 20 minutes, Daniel veered off the main highway onto a narrow country road. Grace frowned. "This isn't the way to Sunnyvale," she said. Daniel didn't reply. He drove another 5 minutes, then stopped on a gravel shoulder beside an empty field. The silence in the car grew thick. "What are we doing here?" Grace asked quietly. Daniel turned in his seat, expression cold. "This is where you get off, Mom." Sophie's eyes widened. "Daniel, what are you?" "She'll contest the will," he snapped. "It's cleaner this way. There's a gas station 5 miles up. She'll figure it out." Grace sat frozen for a moment. "You're leaving me here?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "You have your clothes, your medicine," Daniel said, opening her door. "We'll send for the rest later." Sophie bit her lip, guilt flickering in her eyes. "Mom, Go," Grace said softly, cutting her off. "If this is what you think is right, go." Daniel shut the door, climbed back in, and drove away, the sound of gravel crunching beneath the tires fading into the wind. Grace stood alone on the side of the road, clutching the small suitcase they'd packed for her. The sky stretched wide above her, and for the first time in days she could breathe. The wind tugged gently at her coat as she watched the car disappear. The betrayal should have broken her, but instead it sharpened her mind. "You don't know me at all," she whispered. She looked down the long, empty road, sunlight spilling across the gravel. There was a gas station 5 miles north, Daniel had said. But Grace turned south toward town. Her shoes weren't made for walking, but her will was. Each step was painful, but it carried the weight of a woman who refused to be erased. Her purse was heavy, not with money but with proof and purpose. 2 hours later, with her feet aching and her throat dry, Grace reached the edge of Willowbrook town. The first place she saw was Miller's Gas and Grocery, the same small store where she and Henry used to buy coffee beans years ago. She sat on the bench outside, catching her breath. The world around her moved on. Cars passing, people talking, as if her life hadn't just been torn apart. Then the door opened, and Ray Miller, the owner, stepped out. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, eyes wide with concern. "You all right? You look like you've walked a mile." Grace gave a faint smile. "Maybe 2, she said softly. "It's been a long morning, Ray." Ray frowned and glanced at her suitcase. "You want to come in? Get some water?" Grace nodded gratefully. Inside, the air smelled of ground coffee and pine cleaner. Ray handed her a bottle of water and leaned on the counter. "I was real sorry to hear about Henry," he said. "He was a good man." Grace swallowed hard. Yes, he was. For a moment, silence settled between them. Kind, gentle silence. Then she asked quietly, "Can I use your phone, Ray? The office one, if that's all right." He nodded without hesitation. "Of course. You don't even have to ask." He led her to the small office in the back, where the old landline still hung on the wall. Grace dialed a number she'd known by heart for decades. "Jenkins' law office," came the voice on the other end. "Mr. Jenkins, it's Grace Whitman," she said. "I need your help." There was a long pause before he answered. "Grace, I've been trying to reach you. I expected you for the will reading." Her heart stopped. "What will reading?" Jenkins's tone darkened. "Your son brought one last week. But it doesn't match the file I have from your husband. I knew something was wrong." Grace straightened. "Can you meet me?" "1 hour," he said firmly. "And Grace, bring whatever you have." Grace hung up and turned to Ray. "Do you sell prepaid phones?" she asked. "Sure do," he said, already pulling one from behind the counter. "You need anything else?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Just the phone, and maybe another bottle of water." He waved her money away. "On the house. And Grace, whatever's going on, you'll get through it. You always do." She nodded, throat tight. "Thank you, Ray." Stepping outside again, she took a deep breath of cool air. Her life had just been ripped open, but for the first time she had control of the thread. Mr. Jenkins's office sat above the Hazel Street Library, an old Victorian building with a green door and a brass bell that chimed softly when she entered. His secretary, Helen, looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Whitman, Mr. Jenkins is expecting you." Grace followed her down the hall, her heart steady now. Jenkins stood by the window when she entered, his gray hair catching the afternoon light. "Grace," he said warmly, gesturing to a seat. "Tell me everything." And so she did. The funeral, the forged papers, the roadside, every cruel detail. He listened without interrupting, his face growing darker by the minute. When she finished, she opened her purse, took out the small fireproof box, and placed the deed in front of him. "This," she said quietly, "is my truth." Mr. Jenkins adjusted his glasses, scanning the old deed carefully. The paper was yellowed but strong, her maiden name written in steady ink. Grace Eleanor Brooks. "Well, Grace," he said slowly, "this is gold. You own the only section of the orchard that carries the natural water source." He leaned back, tapping the edge of the page. "Without this, no irrigation, no orchard, no development." Grace nodded. "Henry called it our safety net. I suppose he was right." Jenkins's expression hardened. "Your children forged that will." I'll make sure the court sees it. He opened a file drawer and began pulling papers. First, we'll freeze the sale. I'll file for an emergency injunction today. Grace folded her hands on her lap. I don't want revenge, she said quietly. I want what's right. Jenkins looked up, his voice softening. And that's exactly what we'll fight for. Truth is justice enough. He drafted letters to the developer and county clerk, each word a small strike of justice. Grace sat still, watching him, feeling years of silence finally break inside her chest. They thought I had nothing left, she murmured. But I still have the truth. By noon the next day, the injunction was filed. The developer's office received a formal notice halting any land transfer connected to Willowbrook orchards. Panic rippled through the deal's investors when they learned that the most crucial 20 acres were owned separately and legally untouchable. They'll back out, Jenkins told her over the phone. Developers hate messy ownership. Grace smiled faintly. Let them. The orchard wasn't built for profit. She sat by her window that evening, the town quiet beneath the fading sun, and whispered to the air, Henry, we're safe now. Later that night, Grace's prepaid phone buzzed. It was a message from Sophie. Mom, please call. We didn't know about the other land. Daniel's losing it. Let's fix this. Grace stared at the words for a long moment. There was no apology, only fear of losing money. She didn't reply. An hour later, Daniel called Jenkins demanding answers. His voice sharp through the speaker. You can talk to my lawyer, Grace said calmly when Jenkins handed her the phone. Daniel snapped. You can't do this. I already have, she answered softly. You sold greed, not gratitude. Days passed, and the storm began to settle. The developer officially withdrew from the project, unwilling to face a lawsuit. The fake will was declared suspicious, and a court hearing was set to verify the true document, the one Jenkins had kept safely in his archives. Daniel and Sophie went silent. Grace didn't celebrate. She simply returned to her small rented flat above Baker's Lane Cafe, a modest space that smelled of cinnamon and comfort. The world outside was still the same, but she had changed. She was no longer waiting for anyone to save her. She had already done that herself. Each morning she walked past the orchard. The trees were blooming again, white petals fluttering like soft snow across the soil. Children laughed in the distance, chasing butterflies along the fence line. Grace paused often, touching the wooden gate as though it were Henry's hand. It's still ours, she whispered. Not in wealth, not in paper, but in spirit. She met with Jenkins weekly, finalizing the land trust that would protect the orchard forever. Her plan was simple. Pass the water rights to the local farming cooperative so no one could ever sell or destroy the land again. Word spread through Willowbrook that Mrs. Whitman had saved the orchard. Neighbors dropped by the bakery to shake her hand, some even bringing baskets of apples from their own trees. You gave us hope, one young farmer said shyly. Grace smiled. Hope grows best when watered with truth. In the evenings, she held small classes at the community center, teaching quilting, baking, and basic gardening. The laughter of young people filled her heart again. She had lost her old home but found a new kind of family, one built on respect, not inheritance. Meanwhile, Daniel and Sophie stayed away. Rumors whispered through town that their city reputations had suffered after the forged will surfaced. Grace never confirmed or denied it. She held no hatred, only quiet distance. When Sophie finally wrote a letter months later, I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know he'd go that far. Grace read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in her Bible. Forgiveness didn't mean return. Love doesn't need to forget, she told herself one morning. It just needs to let go. The orchard still bloomed, just as Henry would have wanted. Years later, when spring returned and the apple blossoms danced again, Grace stood on the edge of the land she had fought to keep. The farmhouse was still there, the air thick with the scent of new fruit. They underestimated me, she said softly, running her fingers over the rough bark of an old tree. But I never underestimated love. A group of children from the cooperative passed by, waving. "Mrs. Whitman," they called. She waved back, smiling. The orchard was alive again, not as property but as legacy. A legacy protected by a quiet, unbreakable heart. As she sat beneath her favorite apple tree, Grace closed her eyes and listened to the wind whisper through the branches. "You did it," she imagined Henry saying. "You kept our promise." She smiled. "Yes, I did." Then she looked toward the horizon, sunlight spilling across the hills. "For anyone who's ever been told this is where you get off," she whispered. "Walk if you must, but never without your worth." Her voice was calm, her spirit strong. The orchard stood tall behind her, shining in the afternoon light, a living proof that quiet strength can outlast betrayal, and truth will always bloom again.